guest on the show today, Ibiso Graham-Douglas, is a seasoned publisher and book industry professional with over 2 decades of expertise. Now, her impact is evident across the literary landscape with a portfolio of titles across various genres. As the founder of Paperworth Books, Ibiso firmly believes in the inherent richness of African narratives, considering them fundamentally universal and complete in their own right. I think that's a perfect way to just pin it and the best way to introduce you. And I'm so grateful, like I told you earlier, for this book that you've released and you published and edited.
Yes.
I mean, first of all, before we even get into COVID-19, I told everyone watching that I'm going to give them a riddle. Yes. They should guess what COVID-19 is about. But let's start out with with book publishing. Talk to me about your experience and how long you've been doing this.
I've been doing this I've been publishing for just about 15 years. So I started my foray in the book industry as a bookseller. And then I now segued into publishing. So I'm a hybrid book publisher, and we publish all genres, non-fiction, fiction. We also we also work collaboratively with institutions and organizations who actually want to publish from reports to books to just also to get their communications right. Yes,
so that's a pretty big deal.
It's quite
very important, actually.
Yes, it is. Communication is key.
Exactly.
So nothing gets lost in translation.
That's important because what you just rightly said, talking about our culture, our stories, one of the ways I think is available to preserve them for decades, for years, is through this.
Oh, yes.
And now you've written about one moment that I would say was definitely one of the most tumultuous moments we've ever had as a country. And it's interesting that you wrote about COVID-19 because I've heard a lot of people say things like, was COVID even real? Did COVID even happen? So talk to me about this book that you put out.
Yeah, well, this, I wrote a story. So this COVID-19, it's a collection of stories and poems set in COVID-era Nigeria. And it encapsulates both Nigerian experiences and our diaspora experiences. And this came out of a very personal journey for me because I lost my mother and had 2 brothers to COVID. So I find the notion now that when COVID is largely dismissed, I find it almost abhorrent. So I felt that there was a need to do something, to document and preserve that era in our history for posterity, so that even in 100 years' time, we have some kind of documentation about the social cultural nuances of COVID in Nigeria.
Now, this is purely fiction,
yes,
correct?
It is.
Now, when I think of this, a person picking up the book to read, I see Dolapo Marinho, you had an LNG...
Yes, the current LNG prize winner,
Exactly.
Obari Gomba. He contributed the poems to the anthology. Yes, and we have acclaimed writers like Michael Afianfia.
Yeah.
He's really prolific. He's just released his 6th novel. The 7th is on its way, end of this year. Chimeka Garrix, who's written the classic quintessential Niger Delta story, Tomorrow Died Yesterday. Olu Korede Yeshao. He's also quite well known. He's an editor for one of the newspapers, the arts editor for one of the newspapers. And also I gave new writers their first opportunity, because one of our ethos at Paperworth has always been to harness local creativity content, especially with book publishing and for writers. So, we're very open to giving writers their first opportunities, to write. So that was what we did. And we came up with this collection of stories set all over Nigeria and the diaspora.
How would you assess the space in terms of the viability of the talent to write? We have a lot of people say, I'm a writer, I write. And it's great to meet an actual publisher because I've heard a lot of writers also say one of the biggest issues is getting their work published. So I'm trying to now juxtapose that with your publisher. And now you're opening my eye to the fact that there are this many fantastic writers from Nigeria.
Yes.
But then there's still a lot of people who would say there's no infrastructure, there's no space for writers like myself. So I'm trying to understand, is it a viability of talent, or what are the issues here? Do we have a space for great writers like this?
Yeah, I think we actually have a space for great writers. You know, I'll say two things. Number one, book publishing in Nigeria cannot be looked at in isolation. We have to look at it in the context of our economy. And part of our economy is also, we have to also consider things like, you know, the educational systems and all of that. You know, so I'm like, it's a global issue where many people know that most writers cannot actually earn a living from their writing. So now, but if you do good work and we can option it for movies and TV series and things like that, then you can actually begin to earn, you know, a good living. But the thing is that we cannot say because you don't get an immediate financial reward, you would not write. Writing is like singing, is like acting. It comes from an intense place of passion. So you have to be talented and you have to be passionate about it. So when I'm talking to new writers, I tell them, look, don't give up your day job. You know, you can start writing, you know, on the side. And also really and truly, even internationally, a lot of authors do not necessarily get known for their first novel or for their first books. That's on one hand. On the other hand, Nigeria does have talent. But the thing about it is that with writing, it's a lot of work. It's sitting down on a computer and just churning out material. And that's where people like me come in. I'm an editor and a book publisher, you know, so usually I midwife the process with my writers, you know, so there's a lot of back and forth, go back, do this, come back, you know, all of that. Until we create the story we feel that is marketable and audiences would actually want to read and appreciate. You know, so we have the talent, yes. We have classic Nigerian business issues, you know, not all novels are commercially viable, you know, some are more than the others, but because yours isn't, doesn't mean you should give up. I would say keep at it, press on. But I also think that, you know, I went into this sector, you know, I found myself here, but I also feel a very strong sense of responsibility that we need to document our experiences, you know, indigenously, contextually, you know, for posterity. We owe it to the coming generations to document our stories about who we are, where we are at every given point. You know, yeah, we are really grateful for the Chinua Achebes and the Wole Soyinkas, but they are really, really post-independence literature. So we need to take that. Every generation has that responsibility. We need to take that on, you know. What was it like in military era Nigeria? What was it like in COVID Nigeria? What was it like in NSAS Nigeria? You know, what was it like in Boko Haram Nigeria? These are socio-cultural issues that, whether we recognize or not, impact our psyche as a nation, as a people. And that's where people like me come in. That's where writers come in. You know, we ensure that we preserve the stories for posterity and hopefully make money in the process.
Now, intellectual property should play a role here as well.
Yes.
Because I imagine with movies, when you create a film, you know, it's your IP. There are laws and there's, you know, the Copyright Act and there's protection around that. But I've never really thought of, I mean, I know books fall within that category as well. Yeah. But how do you work around protecting the authenticity of what you've written? Because I could read this right now, and after reading it, I say, you know what? I want to do a film. But I'm not going to call it, let me pick out one of the titles in the book. I'm not going to call it, let me see. I'm not going to call it Wuhan is Next Door by Obare Gomba. I'm not going to call it that. I'm going to call it something else. I'm going to probably call it Kachi Lives in the House Opposite the Street.
Or something.
Or something, you know? Yeah. But it's based off of this, and I find that that's also a big issue. Yeah, but with writers. Yeah, but we do have copyright protections. Yeah. You know, quite a few of the books that we've done, we have actually optioned the film rights. So we collaborate with the film, because we have a very Nollywood is so vibrant. It is. And so many beautiful things are coming out of Nollywood now. So we collaborate quite closely. You know, I have directors, producers reach out to me and say, look, I need a writer for this. Do any of your novelists, do they fit this bill? You know, I've optioned at least a couple of the novels that we have. I've been licensed. We've optioned them for film rights, you know, to even international companies. You know, the thing about copyright is intellectual property. There's no copyright on ideas. But once you put it in book format, we're already having it. So this is, every writer here is protected, their copyright is protected with this work. But their copyright and their moral right is well
protected.
Yeah.
And because we have evidence, if you infringe on it, Paperworth will go to the extent of the law to ensure that our authors are properly remunerated for their intellectual property. So it's not something that we take lightly. And I know that there are a few publishers in Nigeria doing phenomenal things, and none of us take it lightly.
That's very important.
Yes, yeah, we work to preserve the IP of our authors, our writers.
Because as a writer, I think that's one of the things I'll really be concerned about. Now, back to COVID-19,
Yes.
my thinking is this is a book that should definitely be in schools.
Yeah.
What's your take on the fact that literature of this magnitude is only taking from senior secondary school?
Yeah, I think generally as an advocate for books, for reading, I think that we should expose young children to as wide a genre of literature from as early as possible. Because, the thing about literature, the thing about books like this is the informal aspect. It's the social commentary, it's the nuances, it's the ability to actually, I don't want to actually engage with the mind of somebody in an informal way. So that's why I think it's so important. And I think it is a shame that we have to wait to senior secondary for that. I think, from as soon as children can read, we should be having reading classes, we should be having book clubs, we should be having reading groups, we should be having reading parties, we should be having reading function, reading events, because I think that that is the informal way we can strengthen the overall educational sector. The days of education being going to school and coming back is over. Yeah. It's a continuous process. It is lifelong, and it is through many mediums and many avenues. So I really, subscribe to the idea that children from quite young should be exposed to reading where possible, and they should access the books that are true to their realities.
I couldn't agree with you more. I remember reading certain books, and now I think to myself, what if I had more time? What if I started reading these books earlier? Because if you notice with some schools, it's more like, okay, you're about to write WAEC, you have a whole list of books you have to read.
Through.
And I'm like, what if I started reading this book in GSS1?
Yes.
What if I just read it? Because it's like, okay, just read this one. Okay, then you read this one. And I'm just like, what is going on?
Yeah.
But for real, piracy is another major issue.
Yes.
I remember there's this popular book, All the Men in Lagos Are Mad.
Yes.
That book is so pirated.
I know.
And it makes me wonder and they pirate it to the extent of the cover.
Everything. They pirate everything.
They will even pirate your logo.
Yeah, and the funny thing is sometimes they actually go to, for publishers who actually print abroad, sometimes they actually go to the printers abroad.
What?
Yes, and get them to print your books. That is one of our biggest challenges as book publishers. It's one of the biggest challenges we have, There's the government commission. They try. Everyone tries. But I think that for us to be able to kick out piracy, I think we all need to be vigilant. So let's not just leave it to the responsibility of the author and their publisher and government. All of us. You, the buyer on the street, even the vendor, we all need to be vigilant. And one of the ways I would say that, I say be careful where you buy your books. Make sure that you get your books from credible sources, because you have to recognize that the same way someone, someone goes to the farm to farm, or, someone in telecoms work 9 to 5, it's the same thing for writers, So they're spending time on their computers for hours on end to churn out these stories. So if we feel a collective responsibility to safeguard, their property. Because that's the thing about piracy. When you're stealing from the writer, precisely, you're stealing from the author, because you're stealing their property. So when we come to that consciousness, I think we all should take responsibility and be vigilant and say, no, this is, if you buy something you think is pirated, go back to that person and say, this is pirated, this is wrong, and then report them to the publisher. I bought your book from this place. I thought it was real, but it turns out it wasn't. Please check that. I know that I've done it for other books that I've bought. I've bought books before and I realized, hang on, this is pirated. I always reach out to say, look, this is where I bought this. This is your book. I bought it here, and I realized it's been pirated.
How did you know? How can you tell a pirated book?
The quality, number one. The quality, and then increasingly, some publishers are now putting like holograms on their books, so that you can distinguish what is real from what is fake. And really and truly, if you buy by the wayside, there are places that you buy, that it's just piracy. So I think buy from credible bookshop. A lot, social media has changed the game. Most publishers, most writers are actually on social media, and if you reach out to them directly, you will get the authentic. You will get the real copies of the book.
Now, as a creative industry, like you rightly said, there's Nollywood, there's music. We have vibrant Afrobeat space. Nollywood space is going global. We're in streaming. These are things that we used to imagine, we used to dream of, and now we have it. It's with us. They're just about to release Fumulayo Ransom Kuti as a movie. And one of the things I'm so excited about is I cannot wait for that movie to be a play, because I know the likes of Bonale Austin Peters are just waiting to just...
She actually did.
Yes, she did. That's what I'm saying. So to just like replicate that on stage, it will be phenomenal.
Yes.
It will be mind-blowing on stage.
Yes.
So that's another industry that we now see it's thriving. It has always thrived. Harewood just did 10 years, of traveling around the globe, telling these beautiful stories of powerful women. This is play. This is women singing with their voices and dancing and playing the drums and everything. But now with books, that's also an angle to creativity. So as an industry, how can we come together to really push this angle? Because these are all Nigerian writers.
Yes.
And they also have a voice. And I'm guessing they also need the funding.
They do.
And the remuneration that comes from creative exploits.
We
Precisely.
do,
so how can we push this industry forward, because it is an industry in itself, like every other?
Yes, it is an industry. Like I mentioned, I said when they're talking about creative industry, they often forget the publishing aspect. They often forget us. I think partly because our heritage in Nigeria has been very much academic publishing focused. So a lot of and that's really where the cash cow is, and they have stronger revenue streams, because that every year you will need new books for but they are increasingly there are new publishers like myself, like even some of the books we've done are actually in the academic we've done things academic book, but I think it's really just the support. It's the same thing, funding. We all need funding, but everyone is asking for government funding, private sector for all of that, but I think there is no support like actually just buying the book and supporting the writer. Buying the book is very different from the rest. It's a long tail effect. Our margins aren't the same. It's a case of economies of scale, economies of scope, putting all that together, So the business model has to be right. That's why a lot of us in Nigeria, we're actually hybrid publishers. You hardly ever see pure traditional publishers, because we recognize that the business model that works for Nigeria is hybrid. So we do contract publishing as well. We do traditional, just to give. So, and when we do, when we pursue that model, it's so that you don't have to have money to actually get your book out there. We can support creative talent that way. And I'll just say, really buy Nigerian books, read Nigerian books, share the word about Nigerian books, give Nigerian book publishers and writers opportunities. That's the way, you can support and strengthen. The rest have to do with, possibly, financial institutions and government, and, in some cases, policy. But as a general public, right now, I'll say support our writers, because Nigeria has phenomenal writers. In the last 10 years, we have discovered some real fantastic writers in Nigeria, in the diaspora, all of that, and who just want to tell authentic Nigerian stories. And it behooves us to support them, as much as we can.
Can anyone be a writer?
I used to say, I think yes, if you do the work.
Okay.
Because it is a lot of work. So if you do the work and you work with a good seasoned editor and publisher, they're able to mine something good out of you.
Okay.
But nevertheless, some people are really talented. Some people are really talented, It comes easy to them. They sit down. I mentioned Michael Afefe, who contributes to this. I said, he just sent me the manuscript for his 7th novel. He's 7, he's that prolific. And he just tells me, look, if he just gets some time, he sits down, and really good stories, he's written Mechanics of Yenagoa, he's written Rain Can Never Know, he's written the first Canadian Nigerian diaspora,
Yes.
migrant experience, Jackpot experience, leave my bones in Saskatoon, and
his titles are so like apropos. That's his title on
this
that's his story here.
Yes, and his story in this book is actually why I really like it is because in this book his story is in pidgin. He wrote the whole story, and it's quite
that should
funny.
Be interesting.
It is very interesting, and it's quite
Maybe if
funny.
I need to brush up my pidgin, I might just read that more than one time.
So we have people like that. We have Chimeka Garrix, of course, Chimamanda, is there, Oyinkan Braithwaite. We have really talented writers coming up. One of the contributors to this book, Dolapo Merino, is her first. We're working on her novel together. She's really good, really talented. Nigerians are trying. Nigerians are trying.
Yeah.
So, Nigerians writers are trying, I should say, and so they need the encouragement. So read their stuff. Buy it. Don't borrow. Don't photocopy. I'm telling you, don't photocopy. Don't borrow. Buy it, tertiary institutions, change up your literature list once in a while. There are new books coming out every day. Let the students read books that are fresh and new and, being released. So that's really the support, we can say read the books, buy it, read it.
I'm quite excited about this book. I'm definitely going to read.
Yeah.
Just going to apropos, someone can be kind and still lack empathy. Now that's the line. That's a catch. That's how you know it's about to be good.
Yes.
What led to that? I want to find out. But Ibiso, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your light on books. Before I let you go though, COVID-19, did you try to get that riddle? Did you attempt it? Because it's COVID-19. So what's the story?
COVID-19. I think it's a Nigerian inside story.
It's a Nigerian inside joke.
It's a Nigerian inside joke.
Get the book.
Get
Don't
the
tell
book.
them.
No,
Get
we're
the
not
book.
telling them. It's a Nigerian
When you
inside
get the
joke.
book and you find out, you would actually laugh. Because to be honest, not only is it an inside joke, it's also like a rude awakening to our reality.
Yes.
It's like you're going to look at it, you're going to be like, I was guilty of that. Wow, I did that. So yeah. If you know, you know. So get the book. This is amazing. Ibiso Graham-Douglas.
Yes.
Thank you for joining me on the show today. I'm so happy we were able to do this.
Yes, same here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.